Hello, history nerds and historians. My name is Krystina, and this is Effed Up Mythology. This is where we talk about a little tidbit from mythology that's super fucked up. So initially I was going to drop this episode before Mother's Day, but we are looking at moving to another state and spent the last week exploring there and seeing if we could really see ourselves up there. And wouldn't you know, I forgot my fucking laptop charger at home, so I wasn't able to do any work for this. So you're getting in a couple days late, but honestly, with my personal mental health issues and stuff, I'm just honestly proud you're getting it at all. So in honor of this now belated Mother's Day, I decided that we needed to talk about one of the most famous mothers from Greek mythology. Although, definitely famous for the wrong reasons, but famous mother nonetheless, and disturbingly one of my favorite Greek mythological characters. So today we're going to talk about Medea. The Golden Fleece, magic, witches, dragons, love, betrayal, murder, lots of murder actually, really, really fucked up murder. So trigger warning now, because we're gonna get graphic. So sit back, relax, and practice your oh good god, what the fuck faces, because you'll probably be making them a lot. Long ago, when the king of Iolchis died, Peleus, son of Poseidon, because aren't all of the bad ones sons of Poseidon, usurped the throne from his half-brother and rightful heir, Aeson. But Peleus was warned by an oracle that he would one day be killed by a descendant of Iolchis, and then proceeded to massacre all of the descendants, as one does, except for his half-brother Aeson, which he only did so because he didn't want to have to listen to his mother nag him for the rest of his life about killing his brother. But Peleus did keep Aeson as a prisoner and forced him to give up any claim to the throne. But as a prisoner, he was still able to get married and have a family and all of that. So one day his wife, who, according to Robert Graves, could literally be 8 different women, because despite what the rest of the story kind of portrays, we must remember that women do not actually matter in classical mythology. So one of her names that she goes by is Alcimede. So one day Alcimede, or etc., has a son, and Peleus immediately comes in and is like, "Oh, congratulations! I hope you aren't attached." Because he plans to murder the baby, just like all of the other descendants of Iolchis. But when he enters to take the baby, he finds that nature or some god or goddess is clearly on his side, for the mother and the servants and all of her family are weeping over the small bundle. It seems that the baby was stillborn and Peleus didn't have to do anything. So he smiled, probably like a creep, and left. But as is a common theme in Greek mythology, Peleus made his first mistake when he consulted the oracle at all. There is no escaping fate, and what the oracle says will come to pass, no matter how hard you try. So just never go and save yourself the struggle and stress and let your life be a surprise like everyone else in the fucking world. Because, friends, that baby was not stillborn. Alcimede, or etc., was just super fucking smart and sneaky, and the baby was smuggled out of Iolchis and raised by Chiron, the centaur and hero maker. It's essentially Phil from Disney's animated Hercules. Don't know why his name was changed in the movie, but just picture him. In the meantime, Peleus decided to go back to the oracle because nobody ever fucking listens to me, and the oracle tells him to beware the one-sandaled man. And one day, years later, Peleus is making a sacrifice to his father Poseidon, as one does, when he looks out and sees a young, handsome man with long hair, holding 2 spears, adorned in leopard skin and leather, and wearing one single sandal. He had lost the sandal when he was traveling and came across an old crone who begged all the passersby to help her cross this river. And everyone ignored her except for Jason, who was like, "Yeah, girl, hop on my back. Let's piggyback this bitch. Oh no, my sandal." "That's fine. We'll just leave it. It's not a big deal. Because I'm a great guy who can never do anything wrong, ever." So Peleus bounds over and demands, "What is your name and who is your father?" Well, hello to you too. I'm Jason. Nice to meet you, Mr. Manners. I'm the foster son of Chiron, but I was born son to Aeson, and you are? Peleus ignores him. Tell me, son of Chiron, and also Aeson, what would you do if an oracle told you one of your citizens was going to murder you? Oh, well, I'd tell them to go retrieve the golden fleece from Iolchis. Where the fuck did that come from? He spoke the words, but they seemed to not truly come from him. And that's because the old woman he carried across the river was actually the goddess Hera, who was now super into Jason because Peleus is a disrespectful twat who never sacrifices anything to her. So she influenced Jason and wants her revenge because, I mean, Hera, just look at any of her stories. And it's on brand for her. So Jason asks again the identity of this mystery man who came bounding up demanding answers to weird questions. And when Peleus' identity is revealed to Jason, he immediately calls him out on his shit and is like, thanks so much for taking care of my kingdom for the last few years, but I'm gonna take that back now. Peleus tells him, you're right, I stole the throne from your father so long ago, but before I relinquish it to you, you have to go retrieve the golden fleece. I wonder where he got that idea from. But Peleus explains further. I've been haunted by a ghost of a man named Phrixus who fled from Iolchis a generation ago on the back of a stolen golden divine ram that was supposed to be sacrificed. So when Phrixus died, he was denied burial rights and was never allowed entrance into the underworld, and I am too old to complete this task myself, and his ghost is annoying the shit out of me. And Jason immediately agrees and had a ship built that he called the Argo and assembled a team of people that he called the Argonauts. The myth then goes on to list the many Argonauts, which I am not going to do, but here are some honorable mentions. Heracles was on board, as well as the transgender Canis, who was born a woman but transformed into a man by Poseidon, and Atalanta, a woman. She is a virgin huntress who's known all throughout Greece for being a badass. I love her so much. I want to write an entire book inspired by her, and we'll tell her story one day, but that day is not today. For today, we are talking about Medea, as the title of the episode says. So let's talk about Medea, the cunning, the dragon rider, the witch, the murderer. But Medea did not start out this way. Medea was daughter of King Aeetes of Iolchis and granddaughter to Helios the Titan who pulls the sun across the sky every day. Aeetes was a cruel ruler. Many came to try and claim the golden fleece as their own, but an oracle once told Aeetes that a foreigner would one day come to the island, obtain the fleece, and cause the destruction of Aeetes and his kingship. In return, Aeetes gladly sacrificed everyone who came to his land. It said that he hoped that the news of his cruelty would travel to the edges of the world and no one would ever visit again, which, unfortunately for Medea and her family, was not the case. But it said in some of the myths that Medea was always kind to these travelers and attempted to help them when she could, before they were then viciously murdered. But even more so, Medea dreamed of escaping her tyrannous and monstrous father. Medea was also a priestess of Hecate, goddess of magic, and was one of the most talented witches of her time. So, when Jason came to Iolchis in pursuit of the fleece, Aeetes told him that he'd give him one chance to turn around and go back from whence he and all the Argonauts came, and if they didn't leave, he would start with their tongues and hands and go on from there until there was nothing left. What a great reception. Hello, welcome to my home. Now leave before I gut you like a fish. I think I'm going to put that on a sign in front of my door. But then Medea came out and bargained with her father, who then decided to allow them to continue their quest for the fleece. But he wasn't just going to hand it to him. He told Jason that first he must restrain the two fire-breathing bulls and plow the fields of Ares. And when the field was plowed, he must plant the dragon's teeth in the ground and defeat whatever grows. Jason had no idea how he was supposed to complete that, but he agreed and thanked Medea for her assistance. But then, that damn god of love Eros, better known by his Roman name Cupid, fired a fucking golden arrow of love straight into Medea's heart. He didn't do it under his own accord. He was convinced by Hera and his mother Aphrodite. And thus begins Medea's downfall, which is what usually happens anytime Eros gets involved. Like, why did they have to get him involved and make her fall in love with Jason so hard? I mean, you know what? I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's continue. Medea isn't dumb. She's very familiar with magic, actually. Ovid says she realizes what happened immediately because she fought against feelings of love for so long, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she's in this frenzy of love and completely obsessed over this guy that she met once and spoke to once. She says, "Oh, why do you, the daughter of a king, burn for a stranger? Why? Why must you dream of wedding one whose world is alien?" She says, "I carry steel and stones within me. Why shouldn't I let him take on these tasks that he is doomed to fail and just watch him die? Oh my God, please don't let that happen. Why the hell am I praying to the gods about this?" She says if he succeeds, that they will be tied together in matrimony. She will leave her lands for better ones and be remembered forever and be renowned across the lands as the blessed wife of Jason and the most loved of all the gods, even though I've literally only seen him once. She's still conflicted and makes her way to the altar of Hecate, all the while still thinking to herself, this makes no sense and I am doomed to fail, but if I don't help Jason succeed in his task, I'm no better than my father. But Medea worries that she's going to help him and betray her father, and then Jason's just going to disregard her and marry someone else. She says that if he's capable of that, then let this ungrateful bastard die in the process of getting the fleece, and that's how she'll know what the gods have in store. Something to mention here before we proceed with the thought of gods and everything in mind. Iolchis is in what is now considered Greece and therefore ruled over by Greek gods and goddesses. Iolchis is modern-day Georgia, the country, not the state, in the United States. And although it's said that she was a priestess of Hecate, which says that she possibly followed some of the Greek pantheon, which kind of makes sense considering her ancestry connected to the Titan god Helios, she's still what would be considered an outsider, or, as the Greeks would say, a barbarian. In Ovid, she mentions abandoning her own gods for the gods of Jason and Greece, which says that she didn't necessarily follow the Greek gods. So, Greek gods don't care as much. She's also a woman, which makes the gods care even less. But this will continue to come up and be a theme in the story, but I just felt like addressing it now before we went further. So on the way to Hecate's altar, she sees Jason, and those feelings of love, fueled by the golden arrow, burn in her again. They meet secretly, and Medea thinks to herself that when she gazes at his face, divinity looks back at her, even though she's the one of divine ancestry. Jason then takes her hand and speaks in a soft and loving voice that if she helps him, he pledges to marry her. I'm going to say that again. If she helps him, he pledges to marry her. So from the very beginning, Medea is being used. If it wasn't for the fact that he needed help in order to advance in his life, he wouldn't even be looking at her. And he knew that she knew how to defeat these tasks set before him, and also could probably see the look of love in her eyes. Because come on, she's under the influence of the fucking god of love himself. She's most likely slack-jawed and hanging on every word he says. Like,
That's just so interesting. Just, yeah. No. What?
So she offered to help Jason, but only under the condition that Jason would take her far, far away from Iolchis and her father and keep his vow. Jason swore by all the gods and everything in the world that he would take her away and stay faithful to her forever. Spoiler, he fucking doesn't. So Medea gives him a potion that will protect him from the bulls made from flowers that sprung forth where the blood of Prometheus fell. And because of her potion and her potion alone, he was able to complete the first task. The bulls burst forward and the entire meadow catches on fire. Jason walks through the infernal fields while the frightened Argonauts look on. But the fire doesn't touch him and he easily yokes the bulls. So he plows the field with these fire-breathing bulls and plants a dragon's teeth. Immediately, armed soldiers spring forth from the field ready to fight. The Argonauts scream. Jason is vastly outnumbered. Medea almost faints and sits on the ground and whispers a spell for his safety. But Jason outsmarts them and throws a giant boulder into their midst and makes them fight against each other because after all, they're just dumb full-grown babies. And then he just finishes off the stragglers. The Argonauts cheer. Medea beams like her grandfather Helios, but she can't let the people know her true feelings lest her father lashes out. Jason then goes to Aeetes for the fleece. Jason held up his end. Now it's Aeetes' turn. Except Aeetes has absolutely no intention of giving him the fleece and threatens to burn down Jason's ship and massacre the entire crew. So Medea hears about this and decides to help Jason. Again, surprise. She takes Jason and some of the Argonauts to the secret field where the fleece is kept guarded by the fierce dragon larger than the Argo itself. It's described by Ovid as a tri-tongued crested serpent with hooked teeth. But Medea is unfazed. She calms the dragons, whispering incantations in its ears, and puts drops in its eyes made from juniper that makes it fall into a deep sleep. Some translations say that this actually kills the dragons, but I just choose a little nap. This gives Jason the time to retrieve the fleece, and in doing so, Medea knows that her cruel and monstrous father will seek retaliation. Can we take a second to talk about how they're literally up against dragons and fire-breathing bulls, but her father is a monster? I think that just says so much about life in general. So people have already alerted Aeetes, and the soldiers are sent to kill them before they can get back to the ship. One of the Argonauts dies in fleeing, and a few others are wounded, including Jason and my Atalanta. But not to worry, Medea is a skilled healer, and well, because what can't she do? But not even Medea can heal what happens next. If you hear purring, that is my cat who's coming to say hi. Jason and the Argonauts hid Medea on a sacred island while they met with a third-party king who would decide what would happen with the fleece and Medea. In the meantime, Aeetes and Jason were in a truce and could not pursue each other. But Medea secretly writes to her half-brother Aeetes and told him that she had been kidnapped by Jason and his men and one woman and needed him to rescue her. As a good brother, he did just that, and Jason and Medea kidnapped him. They brought him on the Argo, and her father started pursuing them again because at this point they violated the truce. So they're sailing as fast as they can, but they are no match for Aeetes and his fleet, and they will soon be overtaken by her terrible father, who will show no mercy. So Medea, in a split instant, snatches up her brother, slits his throat, cuts him into pieces, and one by one throws him into the sea as her father, and I'm sure all of the Argonauts, look on in horror. Now, to properly be at peace in the underworld, there are certain funereal rites that must be completed that you have to have the whole body for. So Aeetes pauses the pursuit to gather the remains of his only son, and Medea and the Argonauts escape. The first place they stop is Aiaia, home of the sorceress Circe, Medea's aunt. Now, murder, especially murder of a family member, was one of the worst things you can do, and if you were not purified of it, the Furies would seek you out. So the Furies are like goddesses of vengeance and retribution who punish people for crimes against the natural order, and murder is definitely against the natural order. So to thwart the Furies, one must seek purification from a land that is not their own. So Medea didn't want her aunt to know what she did before she received this purification, so she covered herself up in a cloak and walked onto the island behind Jason, letting him do all the talking. So Circe emerges and begins the ceremony. She first starts by sacrificing a newborn piglet and letting the blood wash over their hands. She then makes libation to the mighty Zeus himself, offering cakes and oils and honeys to the Furies. She then implores them to cease their pursuit and begs Zeus to forgive the murderers, whether it was a stranger or a family member. When she finishes these prayers, she asks the two strangers to stand, and all the blood-stained clothes are taken away by her nymphs, and that is when Circe sees golden eyes staring back at her. Eyes much like hers and her brothers, and all those who descend from the sun titan Helios. They spoke briefly, and when Circe learned of the extent of Medea and Jason's crimes and what exactly they were seeking purification for, she immediately banishes them from her island, but the Furies stayed away, so they got what they wanted. After the pair leaves Circe's island, Jason and Medea are officially married. The Argonauts rejoice, and the golden fleece becomes their wedding bed. But now that Jason and Medea are officially married and their wedding consummated, there was no going back now. I mean, I don't think that there was any going back to begin with, especially when Medea literally cut her brother into pieces and threw them into the ocean, but apparently it was only the virginity thing that was holding her back. And we all know how much I feel about basing a woman's worth on how many people she has or hasn't fucked. Medea, Jason, and the Argonauts continue on their journey back to Iolchis. On their journey, they encounter some problems, but are able to persevere through it, often with the help of Medea and her magic. I'm not going to go into all of the many things that they encounter on the way, because that's not very important to the story. So, here's where different sources that I read say different things. Both versions end up at the same place, but it's vastly different how they get there. But I honestly couldn't figure out which one I loved more and which one seemed to be the more authentic one, so here are both of them. If you need a refresher about Greek mythology and how confusing it is, I have a whole episode about it called informational session episode thing or something like that. It explains how many different interpretations and beliefs and all of that lead to these often confusing stories. So in this case, we have two different ones that we're going to go over. So the first one is from a compilation by Dr. Nancy Connor, and said that when they arrived back in Iolchis, Jason receives terrible news that his entire family is dead. So apparently word got back to Iolchis that Jason's ship sank and he and all the Argonauts perished. Peleus, the king that sent him on the quest in the first place, decided that he was going to kill Jason's parents and his new baby brother Promachus. I'm guessing Peleus' mother died and he didn't have to worry about her nagging anymore, and this was just what he was waiting for to carry out his plan to kill all the descendants of Iolchis. But when they heard about this, Jason's father Aeson asked if he could kill himself instead, and that was granted to him. So he drank bull's blood, which is apparently poisonous to Greeks. Then after that, Jason's mother, Alcimede, or etc., took her own life, although different myths say different ways. How she died isn't important, though. It's just important that she died. Peleus did, however, get to kill the baby, since he was denied the infanticide when Jason was born. Although I'm not going to say how he did it, because when I read it, I was fucking horrified, and he totally deserves everything that's coming for him. So Jason is obviously enraged and vengeful, and declares war on Peleus, ready to storm the city sword held high. Now, the other Argonauts feel that Jason deserves his revenge, but they all had their own reservations for different reasons. One of the Argonauts was actually Peleus' son. Others felt that they would be completely outnumbered and needed to go home and gather forces. And others were probably just over it at this point and wanted to be done, because at the end of the day, a personal revenge mission is not their business. They set out to get the fleece, they got the fleece, and now they're done. But Medea quieted all of them and told them, I got this. I will take down the entire city by myself. Wait here, conceal your ship, don't let anyone know that you're back, and just keep an eye on the palace roof. When Peleus is dead, I will wave a torch, and the city will be yours. So Medea enters the city disguised as an old woman with some handmaidens at her side. When people try to stop her, she screams, "The goddess Artemis has spoken to me and told me that luck will be brought to the king." Ah! Other people just back off because she's batshit insane. Her and her handmaidens enter the city in a frenzy, like Dionysus is controlling them. Peleus woke up to the noise, and when he heard the news, was terrified of what the goddess had to offer. The Queen Medea meets with Peleus' daughters and tells them that Artemis wishes to reward him and rejuvenate his life so he can make more heirs. She tells them that since his only son was lost at sea, the house of Peleus will die with him, because there's no way that lineage can live on through women, obviously. His son wasn't lost at sea, by the way. He was on the beach with Jason and the other Argonauts. But the daughters didn't believe what this crone had to say. But before their very eyes, this crone transformed into a beautiful young woman. In reality, Medea just removed the glamour spell that she put on herself, but the women were none the wiser and asked Medea what they needed to do. In a cauldron, Medea starts making a magic potion with herbs that she enchanted. An old ram was brought out, and Medea slit its throat and submerged it in the boiling cauldron. And a small lamb emerged a few moments later, and the old ram was restored. Now, pause there, because the other version that I read, which is from the wonderful Ovid, is definitely the more witchy and spooky one, so naturally I love it, but it doesn't really have as much of a motivation for me for all the later events that happen as the one that we just discussed, but it does have a fucking play-by-play of Medea's magic, so of course we're going to talk about it. So this one says that Jason's father Aeson is not dead, just really, really old and dying. I have no idea what happened to Jason's mother or if there were any other children involved, because they aren't mentioned, because they don't matter, obviously. Jason sees his father like this and his heart breaks. He turns to Medea and says, "You've already given me so much and done so much for me, and honestly, I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for you, but I can't see my father like this. And after everything that's happened and the years that we spent apart and him not being able to raise me, I can't just sit by and watch him die now after all this time. So can you please work your magic and take some of the years I have left and give it to him? I'm still young, I can share." But Medea is taken aback. How can you ask me to do something like that? She says. For one, do you really think that I have the power to steal life from one and give to another? And also, you are just so great and amazing, which is arguable. But anyway, it would just be unjust to take away your life, but I will try to extend your father's life and leave you to age until the fates see fit to end it. So Medea waits a few days for the full moon and then goes out into the night, robes loose, feet bare, hair wild, and all of the forest looks on in anticipation. The air is still, the animals are quiet, the stars are glittering, and everything is illuminated by the moon. Medea spins 3 times, pours fresh river water over her head 3 times, and wails loudly 3 times, and then begins her incantation. She calls upon the night, the stars, the flames, the day. She calls upon the earth, the winds, the rivers and lakes, the gods of the forest and darkness, and Hecate herself. She implores them to be her aides in finding the secret herbs needed to rejuvenate her father-in-law. And then a fucking chariot of dragons descends from the sky, and she jumps on and flies off. A chariot of I never knew that I wanted something so bad. She's so cool. I mean, at least in this part of the story, she's cool. Not so much later on, but we will get to that. So Medea flies across multiple lands looking for a specific herb and was gone for 9 days and nights. So Ovid writes that the odor of this herb alone is enough to rejuvenate the dragon, whose skin sloughs off and was replaced by fresh, new skin when she finds it. So Medea arrives back to Iolchis and makes 2 altars, one to Hecate and one to youth itself. Then she digs 2 trenches, sacrifices 2 black sheep, and catches their blood into these trenches. She adds in red wine and fresh warm milk. She calls upon the shades of the underworld and the dreaded Persephone herself. Then she calls for Aeson and sends everyone else away, and those who are remaining are told to look away, or they'll fucking ruin everything. So then she, quote, purifies Aeson by setting his body on fire, then douses it with water, then sulfur, and she does that 3 times. And the whole time, her secret potion is boiling. She then grabs an old, dried out olive branch and uses it to stir the cauldron. And eventually this crusty old branch begins growing leaves and sprouting olives. The moment she sees this, she takes the dagger and slits Aeson's throat and then gives him essentially a blood transfusion with this potion that she made. But I mean, it worked. He was restored. But shit, girl, that was a crazy fucking gamble that you did there. Then they turned their eyes to Peleus. I don't know why. It doesn't explain, at least not in the translations I read. It literally goes from Aeson is restored to Medea enters the city. So the only thing I can assume is that they're just trying to assure that they actually get the throne, like Peleus said, but they could have just returned with the fleece and presented themselves and then wait to see what happens. But no, that's definitely not what happens. Medea enters the city, but in Ovid, she isn't disguised or anything. She just runs into the city as the wife of Jason, seeking salvation, and then is met by Peleus's daughters. She tells them that her and Jason had this terrible fight and that she's done so much for him, including restoring his father back to life. But does he fucking appreciate me? No. Why? Because he's a fucking wanker. But Peleus's daughter ignore most of what she said. Hold on a second, Medea. Did you say that you restored life back to his father? How did you do that? Because our father's old and dying, and we would do anything to restore him, like anything. So Medea tells them that she will help them, but first they need to see what needs to be done to make sure that they have the courage to do what needs to be done. So in a cauldron, Medea starts making her potion with herbs that she enchanted. An old ram was brought out, and Medea slits its throat and submerges it in the boiling cauldron, and a small lamb emerged a few moments later. The old ram was restored. This bout of deja vu is obviously where the two stories converge. Although different versions say different things about how she does this ram trick. Some say that she hid a lamb in the cauldron and did this whole like sleight of hand thing, while other versions said that she actually really did this and gathered all of these herbs and enchanted them with her magic and actually transformed the ram back into a lamb. But honestly, it doesn't really matter because the daughters of Peleus are immediately convinced and beg Medea to do the same to their father. She told them that she would, and to meet her on the roof. So the girls woke their father up and told him to trust them. He was wary, but followed the women to the roof, where Medea spoke words that put the king into a deep sleep. The daughters then start stabbing the shit out of Peleus. Her spell wasn't strong enough to make him sleep through this, though, and he wakes up and asks the daughters why they're doing this to him. And Medea is just tired of him, I guess, and finishes the job and tosses him into the cauldron. And nothing happens. That's because Medea had basically just made tea. She boils water and throws herbs in, but they aren't the enchanted herbs. She waves her torches around and says some words, but they don't hold any power. She doesn't go through like this whole spiel like she did when she was restoring Aeetes. And she only does this whole show as a reason to justify the torch waving that signals to the Argonauts waiting on the beach. But even with all of this, Jason doesn't get the throne. The people of Iolchis were fucking mortified about what happened to the king, and Jason and Medea were run out of the city. So they flee to Corinth, and Peleus' son, that was one of the Argonauts, becomes king. In Corinth, they lived for many years and had 2 children whose names are different depending on the sources, if they're named at all. Most of the time it just says sons or children. And the rest of the myth is what is documented in the play Medea by Euripides, and is really the story that most people know. And that, my beautiful history nerds and historians, is where we are going to stop today. So thank you so much for listening. If you have a story from history or mythology that you'd like to hear me discuss, please let me know. I'd love to hear it, and I'm always looking for new ideas. I just have like a running list of things that I come across, but if there's anything that is really, really cool, it will jump to the top of my list. And if you like what you heard today, and you want to hear me talk more, please consider subscribing, especially so you know whenever part 2 is released later on this week. And remember, history may be watching you. So don't fuck it up. Bye.